Okay, Boomer. You kids don't know how good you have it. Okay, Boomer. I remember when things were simpler back then. Okay, Boomer. Okay, Zoomer.
Hello everybody and welcome to our Halloween episode of Okay Boomer, Okay Zoomer. I am your host, Ghantt Chart, and with me is Daddysquatch.
Hi Ghantt Chart, how you doing today?
Good. Well, I just woke up from a nap and, we've had a nice little pub crawl last night, which we got to, have some nice beers, enjoy the October atmosphere. Saw some really cool costumes that people were wearing. And on top of that, I saw a beer that reminded me of like a Halloween story that I forgot to talk about in our last episode, the Stingy Jack, which...
Ooh, I like that story.
Yeah. So, Daddysquatch is a huge fan of Stingy Jack. He really likes the story mostly because I think Daddysquatch is a huge fan of Celtic mythology. So our ancestors come from Ireland, basically. And as a result of that, we take a lot of, ideas from, Celtic mythology or, intrigue about it. Because it's you get to learn about things from your roots. And one such, Celtic story is that of Stingy Jack. Now, the story goes as follows. There once was a man who lived in Ireland known as Stingy Jack. He was a very terrible individual, and he was an alcoholic. He, would rampage. There would be stories about just how much of an awful person he was. And it was so bad that even Satan himself heard about Stingy Jack's deeds. And Satan decided to go up to him, and said, I'm here to claim your soul, so, come on, let's go, But Stingy Jack was like, alright, fine. But here's what I want. I want to have some drinks before I go, And the devil's like, alright, fine, we'll go to a bar, we'll get you loaded up on some drinks. So they have the drinks, get all sorts of alcoholic beverages. And Satan basically says, alright, so how do you want to do this? And it's like, well, I want you to transform yourself into a silver coin so that we can pay the tab. And the devil was delighted at this. It's like, man, Stingy Jack, you're a pretty interesting individual, that is a really cool idea. So he does that, and Stingy Jack promptly takes Satan, who is now a coin, puts him in his pocket with a crucifix, and basically says, okay, you're not going to claim my soul for another 10 years. You want me to let you out? So Satan, with literally no other option, decides, fine, I'll let you go. I'll let you go this one time, but I'll be back in 10 years. So Stingy Jack, continues living his life. 10 years later, Satan comes back and is like, all right, bud, time for me to claim your soul. And as a result of that, Stingy Jack, was like, okay, fine, you can claim my soul. But I want an apple before we go. Are you sure you're not going to try? No. I'm totally perfectly, reasonable. Because you would think, Satan would be, understanding that Stingy Jack is not someone to be trusted with. But he agrees. He climbs up a tree, grabs an apple, and Stingy Jack puts a bunch of crucifixes around, the tree. They say you can't cheat the devil twice? Yeah, well, apparently this guy did. So he says, okay, you're not going to claim my soul at all, which, probably should have done it the first time, but after that, Satan's like, fine, I will never claim your soul. So Stingy Jack dies, and, as the years go on, he continues his behavior, and he thinks, well, Satan can't claim my soul, so that means I get to go to heaven, right? Wrong. When he reaches the gates of St. Peter, God basically says, dude, you are way too sinful to go into heaven. You gotta go. So he then goes to, the gates of hell, and Satan's like, I made a deal with you that I would never accept your soul. So as a result of this, Stingy Jack is forever condemned to be, to never be able to go to the pearly gates or the fiery gates. He walks the earth as a spirit that can no longer be able to find rest. And as sort of a warning, Satan gives Stingy Jack an emblem, like an ember that glows forever. And Stingy Jack responds to this by hollowing out a turnip and using it as a lantern. And as a result, uses it to carry it through as a light. And we all know, as a result of this, well, it's less known about the origins of this little tradition, but it is one that a lot of Halloween people indulge themselves in. This is how jack-o'-lanterns, are said to have become a thing. This is the origin of the idea of jack-o'-lanterns, which, if you mind if I go on a little tangent, me ranting about the weather, I wanted to do some jack-o'-lanterns, and I'll show a picture of the jack-o'-lantern I did on the screen. Like, I had 3 pumpkins, but I had to wait until, the very tail end of October to carve them, and I had to keep them inside my apartment, mostly because I couldn't, cut the pumpkins. I wanted to make sure that they were in a nice, cool environment, had to hide them away from the sun, because you better believe that pumpkins, if you're not careful, they will rot, and that sucks, And I'm like, okay, I'm going to start cutting pumpkins. But then Mother Nature is like, actually, I'm going to do a couple days of just straight up raining. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I think it was a couple days before Halloween, before I was able to even start cutting into the pumpkins. Because the weatherman said that there would be straight weather of just, just pure, clear skies or cloudy skies, just no rain. But if he's wrong, well, I'll shake my fist in the air and say, damn you, weatherman! Just as every elderly man will shake his fist in the air every time something bad happens. I'm sure you've experienced that, Daddysquatch.
Oh yeah, it's been a wet few week, but it's just what are you gonna do about the weather? You can complain about it, but the weather is the weather. You can see the air is getting chilled in there, the leaves are falling, and it's truly fall. So yeah, I always enjoyed your story about Stingy Jack and kind of where did the jack-o'-lantern come from? Jack-o'-lantern and Stingy Jack. He had a lantern. He said the turnip, but then why did they use the pumpkin?
So this is a podcast. I forget the actual podcast itself, but for what I understood, the reason why they switched from the turnip to the pumpkin is because, number one, Irish immigrants coming to America, one of the things that is nice about America is that you get access to some of the food of America, such as the pumpkin. And the other reason is, supposedly, a pumpkin looks like a human skull if you carve into it. I don't see how it looks like a human skull, do you, or...
I know you can make scary faces on it, so...
Yeah, the scary faces that I went with was the classic, pumpkins drinking some beer, which I made my own little nursery rhyme, which I will read for you. I will be such a poet. I'll be the next Robert Frost, 3 little pumpkins drinking some beer. They're full of drink and full of cheer. I called my daddy, and my daddy just said, what the hell? They stole my beer! And I said that to you, like, I'll get you, little pumpkins.
I'll get you, little pumpkins, stealing my beer.
Yeah.
Alright, well, let's talk about the main subject today.
Yes, the main subject of this episode, which we've hinted at for a few previous episodes, is Sasquatch. Dun dun dun! So... I'm sure we don't have to describe what Sasquatch is. I'm pretty sure Sasquatch is a pretty ubiquitous idea. I mean, even all across the world, you hear of something which I guess you can refer to as the abnormal primate phenomenon, where you have primates in different areas of the world. In Australia, you have the yowie. In Indonesia, you have orangutan, which is like a Sasquatch but an orangutan. In the Himalayas, you got the Yeti. And in America, obviously, you got the Bigfoot, you got the Sasquatch, you got the skunk ape. You have a variety of different of these abnormal primates. And I guess there's really not much to describe them other than, big hairy creatures, half human, half ape, walk on 2 legs. And I think it's a very fascinating subject to talk about, is there some missing link or ancient ancestor from Gigantopithecus? In fact, you even hear stories about people saying that Bigfoot is a ghost or an alien. What do you think Bigfoot is, Daddysquatch?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting to sit there and look at all the different theories, stories, all that, as far as what people think Bigfoot is. All I know is that he is the best hide and seek person out there, because you cannot find Bigfoot. They can find you, but you can't find them.
Yeah, I remember, so there's this podcast that Daddysquatch likes to listen to called Sasquatch Chronicles. And I remember one episode where this lady was talking about her experiences, or was it a woman? It was someone. But anyways, they explained that their experience is that Sasquatch is like the ninja of the woods, you know, kind of hiding themselves away and being very difficult to find, much less even encounter. And you hear some stories, I mean, like, you hear stories about the Sasquatch, like, so I thought we would talk about, like, our favorite Sasquatch tales. Like, obviously, when it comes to, like, whether or not Sasquatch is real or fake, I think I'm going to take a quote from the Big Bang Theory where maybe it's real, maybe it isn't, but it is still fun to creep yourself out thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think first time I heard a little bit on TV and whatever about Sasquatch. You remember, now again, didn't have internet, didn't have, you know, all these different outlets there. I mean, if you wanted to read something about Bigfoot, you had to find a secure book in the library. You know, I know that's a weird fact, going to a building that has all these books called a library.
Okay, Boomer. I think that's the first time I've ever uttered "Okay, Boomer" outside of our podcast title.
Well, but I think it was like the mid-70s, there was this movie that came out, it was called Sasquatch. They had it at our high school auditorium. It was like a couple dollars a ticket to go into it. And what was interesting, they didn't have it at the theater, but the movie Sasquatch itself is supposed to take place in northern Canada. It was actually filmed in Oregon, by Mount Jefferson area. And at that time I watched it, it was like, you saw the classic, they had the classic Bigfoot stories in there, and they were scary. They were very scary at the time, you know. Now you look at it today and you look at the special effects, you're like, wow, not that, you know, not what you'd see in today's movies. But back then, you know, it was pretty scary. So, of course, after seeing it, then you're like, oh, I gotta go out there and I gotta have my own expedition to go find Bigfoot. And it was fun too, is that I had a very good friend at the time, and he was really into Bigfoot and stuff. And in fact, some of our escapades as young teenagers with Bigfoot, trying to scare people with it. We won't get into too much details about it because we got caught, we got in trouble.
I mean, like, I remember, you know, you would be telling me this one story. There was this one mountain that you and Grandma and Grandpa, you know, your parents, went to. I think it was it Mount Rainier, or it was some mountain.
There's a mountain just outside the area we grew up called Saddle Mountain. So it had a big hiking trail, so you could hike to the top. But it was, you know, I think it was like 2,500 feet above sea level and stuff. And you could always see Saddle Mountain in the distance. It looked like it was a double humped mountaintop. But as we're going there, and after seeing this, I always tell my younger brothers, be careful on the trail. There might be a Bigfoot. There might be another Bigfoot. And they got all scared, and they started getting whiny and crying. My parents are like, you know, they're trying to take us out for the day just to enjoy and stuff. And then, of course, my younger brothers and sisters are crying because I'm telling all these, ooh, Bigfoot, Bigfoot. My mom turned around and said, shut up, there's no Bigfoots out here. They're not out here. Just, why are you doing that? Those are saying Bigfoot. Okay, so later in life, I find out, I was looking in a map of the United States where they find the Bigfoot and stuff. And Saddle Mountain actually is a hot spot for Bigfoot. So I knew about it back then.
So I guess you didn't really know. You just happened to accidentally be right.
Yeah, I guess you can put it that way.
I mean, because like there are a bunch of different Sasquatch sightings. Like obviously the biggest in the areas is the Pacific Northwest, but you sometimes hear about Sasquatch in Ohio and Wisconsin, in the southern states, in Minnesota,
Oklahoma, Texas.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know, areas like that too. It's strange. You know, you think of Pacific Northwest. I can understand something being out there, mainly because you go out to the forest there. It's pretty. You can get lost in the woods within 10 to 15 yards off the road. I mean, it's rainforest basically. And it's why you got to be careful when you're out in the woods out there. But the woods around the Midwest or whatever, they're not as much underbrush as you can see out north. So you can traverse them a little easier. You do the woods out in Oregon, Washington, and stuff. But still, I mean, you take a look at this. It's interesting. Take a look at a satellite photo of the United States at nighttime, and you can see there's certain areas that are glowing from all the density of light from the people there. But there's still a lot of empty spots in this country.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess, so what you're saying is, the forest can be pretty spooky.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's not, you gotta be careful. I mean, you don't want to take a gun every time you go out in the woods, but you want to be cautious. And if you're in an area that has bears, at least have some bear spray. It's interesting because I was telling you the other day, I said we're just coming back home from a hardware store on the highway. And it's kind of a big wooded area, that we go through before we get home. There's always animals being hit by cars trying to go from one wooded patch to the next wooded patch. You just see deer, or you'll see raccoons that have gotten hit by cars and stuff. The other day I sat there and noticed that there was, it looked like another dead deer on the road. It was a tan animal and stuff was laying outside, but noticed that it had a real long tail. And I took a look as we were driving by, and it was a cougar. And we're in somewhat the city limits, and I'm like, there's a cougar. Now I know out in the woods, deeper out to the forest areas, the cougars live, but this is getting kind of close into town. I mean, I've come where I walk early in the morning, and I mean in a residential area, and there's deer walking through. We go like Colorado Springs, where we're visiting some people out there, and it's not, unthinkable to sit there and see deer coming through the streets and stuff. They are, I wouldn't say tame, but they're not afraid of people.
I mean, I was, living out in, so I live out in a small town kind of area and visit my parents from time to time, but I wouldn't say I'm out in the boonies, like out in near the woods, but, I'm nearby like a college and a beach area, as well as like a few houses, but occasionally I will see herds of turkey and herds of deer just walking through across the road.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I don't know if it's because, people are moving out, taking over areas, or animals just aren't as afraid of people as they are anymore.
Do you think that's why, like, going back to Sasquatch, like, because I imagine, like, back in the day, you had your occasional Sasquatch sightings, but nowadays it's like they're just more and more coming in. Do you think that maybe it's because we're kind of encroaching on Sasquatch's territory?
A little of that, and a little of the thing is, I think when people, a while ago, when people saw it, they just said, I'm not going to say anything, people are going to think I'm crazy, I'm nuts. Because back then it was like, Bigfoot, are you crazy? Whereas today it's almost, there's podcasts, there's TV shows, there's movies, and all this stuff. Bigfoot. I mean, it's almost like it's accepted. You go into certain towns. And, I think we went to Bailey, Colorado. There's Bigfoot Museum.
Yeah.
And we went to, you go to certain towns, they just embellish, they relish Bigfoot. I've seen pictures of where, the town where it's near where Patterson film took place in Northern California. It's Bigfoot Central for art and all this stuff. But again, I just think it's because it's more accepted than it was back then.
So, now let's talk about our favorite, Sasquatch stories. So, as far as, I guess I'll start first, my favorite Sasquatch story would have to be about Port Luck, Alaska. Now, Port Luck, Alaska was one of those small town kind of areas where people would kind of like set up, they were basically set up by corporations, back in the day, in the turn of the century, to basically be like extraction points to get resources. You get your lumber, you get your fish, they were basically there as sort of, as a form of industry, out in Alaska. And the thing about it is that eventually, as time went on, people started disappearing from the towns. And and the Native Americans would often talk about how this area was like a Sasquatch, because this town was very much on a peninsula with a very narrow bridge, a very narrow land bridge. It's very difficult to get in or out of the town, and it's also, has a lot of high terrain, kind of a very isolated area. And these people would disappear, people wouldn't know what the heck is going on. And as time went on, there would be people, they would find like people, who had died in ways that they couldn't explain. Like, they would be smashed, they would be attacked, and these events just kept getting more and more. And initially the corporation thought that these were just, old wives' tales that the natives and workers were perpetuating to try to get higher pay. But over time, people were just getting more and more freaked out. And as time went on, as, these Sasquatch reportings, kept going, eventually the people were just like, we're done, we're not staying here anymore. There is something in the woods. It clearly doesn't want us here. We need to go. We need to leave. And I think that's kind of an interesting story because, like, the town itself is a ghost town. You can visit it if you're willing to, hike to the area or even take a boat to the area. But I still, have heard stories from this one podcast, two people, I forget what the name of it is. It's like the Candlelight Society podcast or something like that. They talked about it and how it's still a hotspot for Sasquatch activity. And I still think it's kind of interesting, that, you hear the stories about, like, people just, like, of cursed towns almost, and people leaving because they're just like, we need to go, we need to get out of here. And you see, like, almost a real life example of that.
Well, the story had always kind of scared me, or really kind of was probably one of my good, campfire stories was definitely Bauman incident. So it talks about the two trappers. And they were in a pretty desolate part of Idaho. Now, if you've ever gone to Idaho, again, Pacific Northwest, well, not only is it, the woods are very dense and all that, but very rugged mountainous terrain. Idaho is, it's one of those states that if you get up into the northern half of it, there's nobody there because it is so tough to move around and to go through that and stuff. But it was back in the 1800s, I guess. One of them had told this to President Roosevelt. He even put it in his book, but the story talks about these two trappers going into trying to find a new area to go trapping, and they found out that there was this, this area that was isolated, but the natives of the area, the Native American basically said, you don't really want to go in there. It's got evil spirits, and they basically ignored it, and they went into there, and they saw the area was rich with beaver and stuff, and they set the traps. Well, at first they made a lean-to shelter, just to kind of have a central spot. They went out, set the traps, came back. Of course, the lean-to structure was knocked down, destroyed, whatever. All their stuff was thrown all over the place. And I didn't know what was going on, but it was getting close towards night, so they rebuilt their lean-to. They got all their stuff back together, got a fire going. And next thing you knew that, the fire was going down. They were sleeping, but they heard something woke them up and was walking around right outside their camp, and took off running, and one of the trappers shot at it, and then it went across the glade, the other side of the meadow, and was in the wood line. It was yelling at him, screeching at him, and stuff like that. They were like, they'd never heard this before, or whatever. They tried to shoot it again, but didn't do anything. Well, the next morning they thought, we better get out of here. So they went and collected their traps and stuff like that. And they said, well, one guy says, I'm going to go back to camp. I'm going to get camp all put back together. He finished getting these last 2 traps, and then let's get going. So one guy went to the camp, and the other guy got the traps and was walking back there. When he got there, he didn't see his friend. He kept walking over there and stuff, and then he saw his friend lying on the ground with his head, basically twisted. He had something had broken his neck, and then took a big bite out of his neck too. And the reenactment of that story was it was freaky and stuff. The other guy got out of there. He just dropped everything and said, I'm out of here.
Yeah, because I remember that story. You were talking about that movie, Sasquatch, The Legend of Bigfoot. They do a reenactment of that story.
They do.
Yeah, which I guess if anyone is really interested in like Sasquatch movies, this one, so my father, Daddysquatch likes to watch this movie, and we sometimes like to joke about it. Like, I guess most of the movie, he was mentioning earlier, takes place in British Columbia, but I feel like a lot of it is just like, goofy people, doing foresty stuff, but you also have like a cast of characters. You have, what was it? There was one guy who was a journalist who's like, who was like the skeptic, that they would have. You had one guy who was who was the camp cook, and how he got airlifted in some Tabasco sauce. Like, no, he only give me this tiny little bottle.
No, it broke.
Oh.
That's why I was crying.
Yeah, I was crying. And again, they're doing this little expedition to go to this like one valley, I think it was the Pecatow or something like that.
Yeah.
They were trying to like find the Sasquatch, and the thing about it was that a joke that we often tell with each other is that so there's one Native American guy, and they call this they're going to this forbidden area and they're using him as the guide, and as the joke of that movie is, it's like they're going into the area, but the guy's never been there before. It's like, well, my grandfather's been to the area. It's like, well, can we get your grandfather to do this? It's like, no, I'll lead you to the area. We know the way. Well, why do you know? We're all part of the tribe. We know the way. It's like, have you ever seen a Bigfoot before? Perhaps. And that's just a running gag with me and Daddysquatch. It's like, every time this guy says perhaps, it's just like he answers every yes or no question with perhaps.
Perhaps.
So as a result of that, sometimes we will answer yes or no questions with perhaps. So, and I remember one other reenactment they did was also another famous Sasquatch story, which was the classic Ape Canyon.
Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely a scary one too. I've read stories. I've seen different people do their interpretation of what happened at Ape Canyon, but I always like, again, that Sasquatch or the legend or whatever, that movie, they did a really scary kind of reenactment, where, the guys are in there and the Bigfoots are throwing rocks and all that, but the arm would come out and reach in there and try to grab one of them, and it was always very, you're 12 or 13 years old, you're like, whoa, this is horror, scary.
Well, I mean, so the story of Ape Canyon is, in the shortest, broadest of terms, a bunch of, gold miners are in the area. They're trying to, gain some gold. They get a good, vein over at the Mount St. Helens area, but they, over time, hear and see encounters like strange creatures out in the woods. They are freaked out. They decide, okay, tomorrow morning we're going to leave the camp. We'll head out first thing in the morning. But eventually their shack basically gets attacked by Sasquatches. And, the Sasquatches, they break through the windows. They're literally trying to break their way in. You know, one of the Sasquatches is throwing rocks from the top, and you know, these men, you know, realizing, you know, they got to defend themselves, they take pot shots at the Bigfoots. You know, they, you know, put their guns out, they start shooting at it, and, you know, they managed to get through the night, but as things, you know, finally died down, they left. They then told people about the whole ordeal, or at first they made like a pact not to talk about this, but they then went to this one town called Kelso, which, from what another person, this one channel called Bedtime Stories, they do a more in-depth version of it. One of the guy decides to tell the story over a round of drinks, and over time, they all sort of tell, you know, about what's going on, and it becomes kind of big news in the town, you know, with people sort of talking about that in Kelso.
Yeah. That's definitely, you know, there's lots of other different stories that are out there, but it's, you know, it's something that it's not like a jackalope, you know, where you can see, you know, people are or half rabbit, half, you know, antlers on there. You know, it's something that if you were going out in the woods, you could, you know, it may be out there. It always gives you kind of an air of, you know, it could be adventure, terror, or whatever, but gets the old heart pumping.
Yeah, that's why you're a huge fan of like Sasquatch Chronicles, where people would tell stories about, you know, their experiences in, you know, with Sasquatches. Which, if you guys are really into Sasquatch stuff, I would recommend Sasquatch Chronicles. They got some pretty good stories.
Oh yeah, that's very, very good. Solid. And it's interesting. I mean, I think I noticed they're hitting their like 1000th episode, and that's just on what he releases. So I know he's got for his own crowd. He has his own special stories too. Probably if you pay a subscription, you could listen to the real good ones. I'm sure the ones he just gives for free are tantalizing. But
I think probably my favorite one, which wasn't really a Sasquatch story or like an encounter with a Sasquatch, but an encounter into like a boneyard where one of the, I think it's like interviewing an author who is talking about this eyewitness account where he goes into like this area that's just like filled to the brim with bones of different not Sasquatches, different animals. You know, you got deer, you got, you know, your different types of animals, and then you got human bones. Like one person who's like a half-rotted corpse wearing like the classic, you know, fluorescent orange, you know, that they were hunting, and how the person described it as like, this guy, you know, basically had his skull smashed in, you know, like, basically both hands, you know, like, and he basically says, like, I hope to God that the guy, when he died, you know, his death was very quickly, because, you know, it's very terrifying. Because, like, we have sort of this idea that Sasquatch is sort of like the, you know, stay in the sort of the territory kind of thing. But I remember one quote from another channel that I really like, Wartime Stories, which is like, you know, maybe the reason why the stories we get about Sasquatch not being aggressive are the only stories we have, because most of the time, you know, the people who do encounter the aggressive Sasquatch, you know, they don't come back.
no, that's a good point. I think the one thing, you know, just like anything else out there, you know, people could sit there and say, oh, they're you know, they're not going to harm you and stuff. I know that my dad, when he had a farm, you know, sometimes you get different bulls in there. And some of the bulls didn't care, you know, they just, you do not turn your back on a bull, but most of the bulls you could be working in the area and stuff like that, and they wouldn't come down, they wouldn't care, they'd walk by it, whatever. But there was one or two that were really mean. You put your foot in that barnyard, and that bull his head went up, he was looking at you, and you're like, yeah, I think I'm not going to go fix the fence today. So, I mean, it depends on the thing. It's just like anything else. Are they traveling? Do they got young nearby? You know, are they guarding their hunting territory? I mean, it just depends on what they're doing too. I think for the most part, they're supposedly nocturnal. You know, they do more of their stuff at night than during the day, so that's one of the reasons you probably don't see them, because we humans are not nocturnal. We are, you know, definitely daylight able to do anything nocturnal. We've got special vision.
Speak for yourself. I will party all night.
Well, okay, yeah, well. But at the end of the day, it's just, it's something that, again, you take a look and people like to think we've got everything figured out. And you realize we don't, We've come a long ways, but we've got a long ways to go.
Yeah. So, I thought that, since we shared, like, our favorite Sasquatch stories, we would read some fun Sasquatch facts. Like, so I'm going to read to you all the FAQ that I found on the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, which, you gotta admit, you gotta be... So, the thing that always amazes me is just how many groups out there are kind of out there dedicated to hunting Sasquatch, or quote-unquote hunting Sasquatch, and I guess they all have, like, differences between you, like, some of them are like, we're the Oklahoma Sasquatch group, we're the Texas Sasquatch group, and I think another thing that also differentiates the two is, whether or not, they should actually shoot Bigfoot, like, Daddysquatch, do you believe that people should go out and shoot Bigfoot or just leave them alone?
Well, I guess I hate to sit there and go shooting things. I don't like shooting things if you're not gonna, hunting to go and kill something just to kill something, I don't like that. I like it that, hey, I'm going to be shooting a deer because I want the meat. I'm shooting this pheasant because I'm getting the meat. Or I'm shooting that lion because it's defense and it's coming at me roaring and ready to kill me, That I can see, but just to go out and shoot something. However, they always say that, they're never going to, if there is such thing as a Bigfoot, nobody's ever going to believe it until they have a body, or that they can have physical. I said hair samples, footprints, noises. People just say, "Well, that's not Bigfoot." It's almost like you have to do an autopsy on one. So, and I'm not advocating everybody go out there and see if we can get one because, but again, it's just me personally. I wouldn't go out looking to hunt for Bigfoot. However, if I'm armed and one's coming at me,
click bang,
I'll take my chance. Now, granted, you hear all these things, they can take more bullets, so you better hope that you got enough bullets. And if you keep shooting and it's still coming, save one for yourself.
Oh yeah. So I figured let's hang on. There we go. Okay, so let's read some fun facts for the North Wood Ape Society. Is it the wood ape Sasquatch or Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest? We'll skip that. See if there's something interesting. What is the wood ape? Is it a missing link? Taxonomy can be a subjective game, subject to changing rules. However, implying the term missing link, the wood ape, the Sasquatch, and Bigfoot gives the indication of being a primate, one that has the characteristics of a hominid, or the taxonomic group that includes humans, gibbons, lesser apes, and hognins, the great apes, together with their extinct ancestors and relatives. Most academicians, I will try to pronounce it. Academians.
There you go.
I'll cut that out.
You could learn that at the library.
Okay, boomer. Most academians who have studied the evidence fall into the camp that speculates that the wood ape is an undocumented species of great ape. This position is supported in part by the analysis of hundreds of casts of reported Bigfoot tracks by the Ohio State University biological anthropologist and primate entomologist Jeff Meldrum and Washington State University physical anthropologist Grover Krantz. So it's basically going through that. It's like a long topic of that, but I guess it goes into what we were asking earlier, which was, what is the Sasquatch, And I guess, in my opinion, if I had to, say what the Sasquatch is, if it's real, maybe it could be like a relative of Gigantopithecus, or just like an entirely new species of ape we haven't discovered before.
Well, it's interesting. If you were to take a look at people always say, where are you going to find Bigfoot? You know, how can we find Bigfoot? Well, you got to remember that their home is the woods, so they know how to maneuver through there. They're very quiet, mainly because they're hunters. Okay, so they don't have spears, they don't have guns, they don't have knives, they don't have that. They got the bare hands. That's how they hunt, and they're very good at it.
Yes.
So, with taking a look at it, you could probably get like any of these animals living or whatever they are, creatures that are doing that. If you really want to find them, you got to look and say, one, they're going to be near water. Okay, they're going to probably consume a lot of water, but they're going to be near water. I mean, probably within a couple miles of some kind of water. Two, they're going to be in an area where they got cover. That allows them to move, hide, ambush, do all that for hunting. But you got to have game. So they got to have animals that they can hunt or food that they can eat. Whether it's berries, fruit, whatever, things that grow in nature that will sustain them. And also is to realize that when it gets cold out, they are going to migrate. When it gets hot out, they're going to migrate. They're going to sit there to where it's more of a temperate climate or whatever. So that's where you say, well, I think the Bigfoot's going to be here. They may have been there, but because of certain conditions, whether it's animals, weather, whatever, they migrate. Just think of before humans had fire. This is probably a good example of how humans actually lived before they had fire, before they had weapons. So, I mean, if you really want to go back in time, it's just, they never, it's like certain animals or certain things, I know I give you crap about this, about evolution.
I guess not to get too political, I do firmly believe in evolution, and, you believe some elements of evolution, but you're kind of skeptical.
I'm not saying that, the Bible and 7 days boom, there's the world, but what I am saying is that evolution, there's so many holes and gaps into it, there are other things in there.
Well, I think it's more,
But that's for a different story. Or a different time, right?
Okay, yeah, we'll have our evolution, topic at some point, where I'll discuss that, which will be a fun episode, hopefully everyone, I say that, but...
It won't be political, but it'll be fun to sit there and argue each other's point.
Yeah, although I'm not going to look forward to that, because I'm worried that commenters, will... The internet can be a very, kind of thing, can be a very feisty kind of thing. But going back to, do you think Sasquatch, does share some ancestry with humans, or?
Yeah, I think if you really, going to take evolution to its baser points, everything shares, some ancestry. They even commented that humans have some kind of, I heard this, in our chromosomes or whatever, some reptilian traits, which is, but if you think about it, reptilians are amphibians. This is where evolution, everything evolved from the water and amphibians and reptiles and dinosaurs and some mammals. And so it always comes back to that, one thing that starts it all. Sounds like that Big Bang thing again.
Yeah. So going on to the FAQ, why hasn't anyone found any, body or bones? Response, physical remains of huge ape species have been found, but not yet in North America. Some researchers, including prominent primatologist Darius Swindler, are convinced that the evidence serves to indicate that the wood ape is a modern-day descendant of Gigantopithecus, a widespread variation of Asian ape of gigantic proportions that lived possibly as recently as 200,000 years ago, according to fossil record. Of course, when most people ask the question, they are usually limited in their inquiry to Canada and the United States. There's no definitive answer regarding the absence of physical remains in contemporary times. The best we can conjure is that the wood ape is a very rare species, and that, like most animals that perish in the wild, their remains do not last long in heavily wooded areas that they seem to prefer. Even the remains of common known animals that die from natural causes or are not killed due to contact with humans are rarely found in the wild.
Yeah, I've heard that even trying to find remains of bear, there's a lot more bears out there. It's very extremely rare unless you shoot a bear that you got bones from a bear.
Yeah, like, again, going back to like wartime stories, they did an episode about the Yeti. And one of the interesting facts is like, if you looked at all the fossils that people use for human evolution, you know, of all our ancestors, every single fossil we have could fit in the back of a pickup truck.
Yeah.
And that always kind of shocked me that that's literally all we have, because humans don't really, our ancestors didn't really live in an area that was advantageous to fossilization.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Why hasn't someone hit one on the road or on the highway or shot one? Well, I mean, I'll show some, you know, I'll kind of answer this, but I'll show a video, hint, hint, wink, wink, that shows something like that happening. But, you know, let's just read the response to that. As with most questions pertaining to the species, we can only speculate regarding why a wood ape has not been killed inadvertently or intentionally to produce a corpse. There are apparently credible accounts of wood apes being hit by vehicles and possibly injured. Needless to say, no body has ever been recovered. One such account from Oregon was investigated by wildlife biologists Leroy Fish and Alton Higgins. Both men corresponded and spoke with the reporting witness extensively over a period of months and found him to be credible. Unfortunately, neither investigator was able to interview the second witness, with whom the reporting witness has lost contact. A large number of individuals have claimed to have shot a wood ape, or at least shot at one, including NAWAC investigators. So, yeah, Northern Wood Ape Conservancy, yeah. So the NWAC, as we'll call them, the NWAC investigators found blood traces that they believe were from a wounded wood ape from their 2011 field study Operation Endurance. Due to environmental degradation, attempts to extract DNA failed. Wildlife biologist John Bindernagel investigated a report of a wounded wood ape. Their witness claimed he shot the creature in the arm. In the following years, Dr. Bindernagel reports that he investigated several sightings from independent sources where witnesses report seeing wood apes with an apparently damaged arm. However, there are few accounts of wood apes being fatally wounded. One of the most thoroughly researched investigations of a claimed wood ape killing was performed by Kurt Nelson, a senior research scientist at the University of Minnesota. So, it's basically, I guess if I had to answer why I think that the wood ape or the Sasquatch, I'm not going to get used to that, doesn't get hurt a lot, is because they're pretty hardy. You know, like, you don't see many corpses because they're pretty strong. I mean, you gotta be.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you look at this, and they're not wearing clothes, they're out there in the elements. So it's kind of almost like you take a look at an elephant. You try to shoot an elephant with a common deer rifle that you'd have out there. You'd piss it off.
Yeah.
So I think they've got a lot thicker hide, and they've got a lot better muscle tone, and maybe their physiology is slightly different from us, where the heart may be a little bit different place than, you know, you'd think a human heart at. But, you know, it just, I think it's just like they said, you know, when things die out in the middle of the woods, I mean, sit there and try to find a grizzly bear skeleton or something out there that died way up in the middle of the mountains. First of all, you got to get there. Second, you got to look for it. Third, just sit there and see it. If that ground gets covered with, you know, ferns, moss, twigs, all that stuff, good luck.
So I'm gonna scroll down to, you know, see if there's a more interesting question from their FAQ. How many are there? I think this one's pretty interesting. Probably not very many. In spite of broad distribution of reported sightings in North America, circumstantial evidence suggests that a large percentage of the sightings in any particular area possibly represent repeat observations of the same animal, or a limited number of individuals. Adult animals are very large, implying long lifespans and low rates of reproduction. Taken together, these and other observations and probable limiting factors suggest that this species is rare. Upon definitive documentation, the wood ape will almost certainly be declared endangered, or until the population dating indicating otherwise are eventually collected. It seems reasonable to propose that a couple thousand of the animals may exist in small population pockets spread across remote areas in North America. So, how many Bigfoots, would you say there are? Would you say that's a fair amount, like a few thousand?
I'd say that's pretty good. I mean, if you had a lot more, you'd see a lot more. It's like deer. I mean, you don't see deer very often, but just within the state, there's like population, 500,000 deer, 750,000 deer, but you don't see, you'll see deer occasionally. Well, that's a lot of deer.
Yeah.
So you think of, okay, it's a couple thousand, you're not going to see them very often.
Yeah. I'll keep scrolling. If this topic we've talked about earlier, I'll probably just scroll, see if there's anything. What do they eat? This is the final one. Reliable reported observations of the wood ape do seem to indicate that they are an omnivore. That is, that it's an animal that feeds on both plants and other animals. The anecdotal data supporting that by the thousands of reported sightings from North America, it is possible to propose that the wood ape's diet consists of nuts, leaves, berries, fruit, fish, shellfish, crawfish, insects, small rodents, squirrels, rabbit, deer, elk, wild hogs, and domesticated farm animals such as chickens and hogs. Other primates such as humans consume animal flesh and as such are both omnivores as well. However, moreover, recent studies suggest that the G. blacki was an opportunistic omnivore, aptly fitting reported observations of the wood ape. So, I guess this is one question I would have to ask. If the Sasquatch is real, what do you think that his preferred food is?
People, they taste like chicken.
Soylent Green is people!
I would say deer.
True.
I would say deer as far as that. The reason is you get a lot more meat when they sit there and talk about rodents, crayfish, whatever. Bigfoot would have to have a lot of meat. So that's why I would say deer is definitely the thing they would be after.
True. So now we got another one. Weird facts about the Bigfoot. Let's see if there's any interesting facts. Yeah, so it's another article I'll have linked. So let's see. Yeah, I'm scrolling too fast. Okay, let's see. While various, if it's something that we've already talked about, I'll scroll past it. Skip that. Skip that. So there's one. One suggested reason for the lack of evidence of Bigfoot's evidence is that they bury their dead. There were several reports of discovering Bigfoot burial grounds over the years. While most comes from less than reputable sources, it is perhaps to explain why there are no one Bigfoot has ever, why no one has, stumbled across a Bigfoot in the wild. So, do you think that's true? Do you think Bigfoot buries their dead?
No. I think they maybe hide it, but I don't think they bury it.
True.
I think they would take it to just an area that, out of the, to be seen there. But I mean, really, when you take a look, you just talked about early human ancestors. All the bones would fit in the back of a pickup. Okay, so, and where did they find them? Did they find them in a burial thing or whatever? I don't think human burials didn't occur till maybe, recently.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm looking at it like, no.
All right.
Just the environment they're in. Just like
Yeah.
I said, I saw this one study they did where they had a deer and they just put it out in the wild. And went through 30 days, it was gone.
Here's one that I think is kind of interesting. Bigfoot and Chupacabra work together to hunt their prey. Okay, so do you think this is true?
No.
You can't
No.
see, but he's just like nodding his head back and forth. It's like no. Let's see. So yeah, websites, a lot of them are just like your standard Bigfoot facts, you know, like Bigfoot likes apples, Bigfoots like to communicate through tree knocks. You know, but I think there is some interesting facts behind them. But one interesting fact, one teeny little fact which I did learn from extra mythology. You know, yes, I know Bigfoot is a myth, you know, can be, you know, very irritating to those that believe in Bigfoot, but apparently there is a region in Washington where it is illegal to shoot a Bigfoot or to kill a Bigfoot. You know, and apparently, I could be wrong, but I do remember hearing that in countries like France, Russia, and Germany, they officially declared Bigfoot a protected species. But again, I can't confirm my source, so, you know, I don't remember where I got that from. I've heard about it, but I, you know, can't confirm that. But, like, the idea that Sasquatch might be a protected animal.
Well, remember I was telling you the other night about the theory of the bicycle shed.
Ah, yes.
Which is basically town in London, town in England, basically bringing in a new power plant. And they had the safety regulations that the city council had to go over. And it was like, you know, 2,000-3,000 page document. And they voted it in like in, you know, a couple hours. Boom, done. Well, you could tell that, you know, it was probably a lot of the information in there was way over their head. However, when they were talking about the bicycle shed that was going to be built to put the bikes in for the workers that are coming to the nuclear power plant, they spent 6 weeks trying to pick out the color. So, yeah, you know, what it is that, you know, France and Russia, they're probably like, yeah, there's no such thing as Bigfoot, but it makes us look and feel good. So, boom. Yeah, we'll get it. Real.
Yeah, they probably didn't take much seriousness to it. Like, it's kind of like one from Count Dankula. I heard that one marine biologist tried to get the Loch Ness Monster declared a protected animal, but it's very obvious he didn't really, you know, have much, you know, belief in the Loch Ness Monster. He only did that because he wanted the Loch Ness to be a protected region.
Yeah, I can understand that, but I mean, if you think about it, think if they did find Bigfoots. Now, what if you wanted to log that area?
Well, the question is, like, you know, if there are Bigfoots, you know, like, what would be the population's response to it? Like, I remember asking that forever ago on Reddit, you know, people were like, you know, or even asking friends, and it's like, oh, that's real. Okay. And then just move on with their lives.
Sure. Nobody cares because most of society doesn't go out of the woods. There's some people go camping, go hiking, and all that. But I mean, really, to be these things, you've got to be out there probably in certain areas. And when they do come out, if you're in an area they don't like, maybe they let you know stealthily, but quiet. I mean, that's one of the things always in the stories. They let you know they're there, but you don't see them. They may throw a rock. They'll growl at you. Maybe hit the tree or whatever. And you know they're there, and all of a sudden you get that feeling in the back of it, that's not a good spot to be, I'm going to get out of here. And as you're walking out, you hear them walking with you. And it's just like, when you do something naughty, and you get caught by your parents at bedtime, and then they say go to bed, and then you're walking down the hall, and you can see your parents walking behind you to make sure you go to bed.
So we got one final thing that I want to go through, which is possible Bigfoot videos and encounters. And I guess I'm going to pause the recording and then, you know, like kind of give our responses to them, to like each of the videos or the sounds, and then include them on the episode. But I figured, you know, like I'll have links to the videos, you know, you guys can, and I'll include them in the videos. But, you know, I figured we would go through some and, you know, just get our responses from that. So, what do you think of that? You know, the Bigfoot throwing a tree in the air.
The video must have been taken out of Samsung phone.
Yeah, I'm looking at the. The audio is not that great, but like going back to like the idea that Sasquatch is, you know, big and mean and just filled with muscles, like Just see that. That is freaky that the thing's like, you know, takes a tree, chucks it into the freaking stratosphere.
I wouldn't mind being that strong, but that was pretty good. I like that one.
Hit something. Hope it didn't hurt the car. Somewhere. Is that it right there? Oh my gosh, go.
So this video I remember you showed me a while back, which was, you know, people, they end up, you know, hitting a Sasquatch or, you know, running over something. They don't know what it is. They decide to go back and they're recording this. And, you know, there's like, oh my God, it's Bigfoot.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you look at that rear view camera, and whatever that was, I mean, it may be staged, maybe fake, but I'll tell you what, if that was a Bigfoot, man, that would have been very scary, because what was running up the road back at him, oh, pest.
So here's what kind of gives me my, you know, so I guess you gotta think of like the bullshit meter, you know, like whether or not this is actually real or not. And this is sort of tripping my bullshit meter, but why were they recording, like, let's say you hit something, you know, so your response is to pull out your phone and then sort of back up. Why were they recording?
Yeah, that's like, I agree with you on that, but...
Because that's what's kind of making me think, like, this almost feels a little staged.
Well, the other thing, too, is I always watch when people take pictures of their food. I'm like, really?
I think that will be the third OK Boomer that we have this episode.
And so you stop and bring a plate and whip out their phone and go, click, and look, everybody, look what I'm eating. I really don't care.
Daddysquatch is not a huge fan of Facebook. Or MySpace, or Twitter, or... God, is there a single social media app that you use?
No.
I don't even think you update your LinkedIn all that much.
No.
I found a little bit of snow, some piled logs, but as we wander up, as we wander up into the trees a little bit, we notice that there's a pile of brush here. And as we look inside, we find out that something.
Brad's getting eaten alive.
Brad, let me climb out for a minute. Let me get a look into this thing.
Oh.
Let me walk around it a little bit. First of all, some kind of creature has taken and piled tons and tons of leaves and branches to either camouflage or make a place to hide. We notice claw marks as we look at the trees and stuff. Then we come around, we spin in here, and we see how whatever it is has been all smoothed out.
So I'm gonna be sleeping with my revolver next to my pillow this time.
We see that they use trees around about to just
And see how they're broken, snapped like
they're
twigs.
snapped like twigs. No hatchets, no no human marks of a saw. Everything snapped as though by mighty, mighty strength. Every bit of the...
How you seem to have picked the human camping area. Like you can see with these fire pits.
We see down here a fire pit, but we see no evidence that there was ever a fire.
He's walking down.
Oh my word.
Bigfoot's walking down right now.
Huh?
See, he's standing taller. Uh-oh! I get back to camp.
We see something moving on the hill above.
Run!
Where?
Where is it? Is it like where
It's
those
stopped.
trees, like right on the other on the
Yeah.
right side of it? No, it stopped and it's looking at us.
It's kind of looking at us.
I don't see it.
Moving now.
The trees? It's to the right of him. It's walking that way.
What tree?
Trees?
Do you
Okay. See that King's Castle?
Yeah. He's that
Look down that
kind of
hill.
little skinny thing.
That little thing.
So this video, like, I've heard people talk with this video, like, kind of like use the trees as sort of like a, you know, opportunity to kind of see, like, you know, to kind of like compare the size as well as the figure itself. And I guess this is sort of going back to like the famous, you know, Patterson-Gimlin film, how people do analysis of the figure, you know, the Sasquatch that walks in that, and how the limb movements, you know, don't make sense in that. And I guess this video right here is more of a blurrier, more, you know, a more blurry version of that film. But I think the other thing that also kind of helps in the, you know, realism factor is, you know, well, not really helping in the realism factor, but like adds to it is the strange structures in the video. You know, you saw the kids playing in that little campground area, you know, that they were kind of inside that little shelter that was supposedly created by someone or something. And it's just really bizarre. It's like, it's kind of like adding more stuff to it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I gotta admit, they've got better eyes than I, because if I was sitting there looking at the mountain, you zoom up, you can barely see. So I'm like, okay.
it would probably be like, you know, Dad, there's a Sasquatch. I was like, wait, what? Yeah, it's like over there. I can't see it. Dad, you know, it's like, I don't have my glasses. I can't see what you're pointing to.
He's trying to talk to us.
So Sierra Sounds, definitely listen to, because that is some strange stuff. I heard that if I was to hear that in the woods, I'd never go in the woods again. I'd say downtown Chicago, New York City, at least it's safer.
So one of the things that I also like in the videos, if you heard at the beginning, is that you heard like the tree knocking, because they say that that's like a Bigfoot behavior, is, you know, knocking trees. Like, why do Bigfoots do that? Is that like a aggressive kind of stance, or why do you think they do that?
Communication. It's distance communication.
That actually makes a lot of sense, because, you know, you hear that for a long distance. It could be...
It's just a quick method of saying, I'm here, and if you're good at making the sound, they can also vector in where it's coming from. Oh, I heard, and it's over there. So I know that Bob the Bigfoot is over there, and he's letting me know. Now, you maybe do that, maybe they're hunting, and they can use tree communication versus vocalizing, which would alert deer or whatever. But if they did the wood thing, then maybe the deer aren't going to be as alerted as it would be to something growling or screeching. Hey, I see a deer over here, roar! Versus this quick pop.
Yeah.
January 21st, about 11 p.m. I'm a couple hundred feet from my house, and you hear it going off in the background right now. Kind of sounds weird. Kind of sounds doggish, hyena-ish, but you can hear it going off in the background right now. It's really kind of strange, just to say the least. It's been going off for about 15-20 minutes so far by the fire station. And it's pretty crazy, so if you can listen, that'd be crazy. Hold on.
Yeah, again, I mean, you hear these things out there, and sometimes they can be a coyote, it can be a fox, it can be wolf. I mean, animals have some different sounds. It's like our cat right now. She's here.
Thank you, Rad.
And she meows, and she does her little grunts, or she does different little sounds that you don't. A cat makes that kind of a sound too.
I'll include like some links to some wolf and coyote sounds, so that way, because people will sometimes say maybe it's just a misidentification. I'll include those in the links to the video, towards this podcast. But I do genuinely believe if you guys got some, if you guys want an opportunity to, sort of compare and contrast, give us what you guys think. Tell us in the poll down below which ones of these sounds, you think are real or which ones are fake.
Yeah, and again,
and I think in this one, I think it does fall into the animal sound category because, like, it's, ooh, Bigfoot in the woods kind of thing. But I definitely do agree that this definitely falls into the animal category because it sounds almost like a coyote.
Yeah, again, coyotes really have a unique, weird sound. I mean, I can see how people get that. I know that my parents' farm, you could go out like at 1 or 2 in the morning, and there was like a pack of coyotes that always come to the bridge tops, and they were yipping and yelling with these. It's loud. Almost sounded like Sierra sounds in there. But what was fun was sitting there trying to yip with them. They didn't like that because I would sit there and I'd yell like that, and they just.
Well, didn't you say that those sounds like what you heard was something almost intimidating?
Well, that's the first time I did it. Then, like a couple weeks later, I heard him on the ridgetop. I did it again, and then something answered back, but it sounded like it was imitating coyotes, but it was not. The coyotes didn't answer back. It sounded something like a coyote.
If you want to hear more about this, I'd recommend, guys, to check out a story which I did read, or I wrote on my Reddit, that I wrote on Reddit called Strange Happenings in the Woods. It's basically a collection of strange stuff that has happened to Daddysquatch in the woods, and I'm sure maybe we'll have like an episode discussing that as well. But, I always thought that was like a really interesting, kind of spooky story and wanted to share with the Reddit people,
No, I know. We could sit there and keep going back on Sasquatch. Just so many topics out there, Mr. Zoomer, that we're still yet to talk about.
So is this, say it, okay, Zoomer?
Okay, Zoomer.
So here's a final one, which I'm going to show for a sound. And I've got so I have a brother-in-law, I won't say his name, but he works as a trucker. And I'm not going to lie, if this happened to me, I would be shitting myself because this is definitely a freaky sound.
Is that? What the absolute fuck is that? Starting to regret that I stopped at this rest stop. What the? And they say Bigfoot isn't real?
Spooky.
Yeah, not gonna lie, I have absolutely no idea, so I mentioned this before, I mentioned this in the Reddit story that I wrote, that you have a lot of experience with dealing with animals in the woods, in the Pacific Northwest area or just near the forest, you've heard a lot of different animal sounds. That thing does not sound like any animal I've ever heard.
Nope.
Yeah, if I heard something like that out in the woods, yeah, I would be freaking out.
Well, I know that Sasquatch can't make it to Hawaii, so I think I'll move to Hawaii. Darn.
You just want an excuse to drink Mai Tais all day on the beach.
And?
I won't blame thank you.
All right.
So that is our that is our episode on Sasquatch and a little bit of Stingy Jack. But I think that that there's a lot of interesting topics that relate to Sasquatch, and I thought for a Halloween episode, it is definitely fun to talk about all the different strange, spooky stuff. So we'll have this episode on YouTube, and we'll have this episode. I'll try to see if I can get it on Spotify. If I can't, I definitely do think that this is an interesting topic. So if you could, give us a like, a comment. We'll have other episodes in the future, just let us know how we're doing and, stay safe. And I'll even put a poll down below, what do you guys think Sasquatch is? Or do you even believe it's Sasquatch? Let us know in the comments down below. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.